For years, legal cannabis has been sold as the safe alternative. Safer than street weed, safer than synthetic drugs, safer because it's regulated. When states legalized marijuana, the message was clear. This is controlled, this is tested, this is safer. But in 2024 and 2025, a series of investigations quietly revealed something disturbing. Legal cannabis products sold in licensed dispensaries were testing positive for dangerous pesticides. Chemicals never meant to be inhaled, chemicals banned for use on cannabis, chemicals linked to cancer, neurological damage, and hormone disruption. And the most shocking part? Millions of products were already in consumers' hands before regulators reacted. This wasn't a rumor spreading on social media. It wasn't a conspiracy buried in online forums. These findings came from state regulators, investigative journalists, and whistleblowers inside the industry itself. And once the first recalls began, more kept coming. For many consumers, legalization felt like the end of risk. No more dealers, no more uncertainty, no more mystery products. But the reality turned out to be more complicated. Because regulation doesn't automatically eliminate danger. Sometimes it just changes where the danger hides. Tonight, we're diving into the pesticide crisis in legal weed, what investigators found, why it keeps happening, and why legalization didn't solve the safety problem and may have created a new one. When states began legalizing cannabis, safety was the main selling point. Legal weed wasn't just about getting high, it was about lab testing, quality control, regulation, consumer protection. For the first time, cannabis could be grown like food, inspected, tested, and tracked down from seed to sale. The industry promised, if it's sold legally, it's been tested. Millions of Americans believed it. Legal cannabis became a multi-billion-dollar industry. Dispensaries became as common as coffee shops, and consumers assumed one thing: legal equals safe. For medical patients, that promise felt even more important. People with chronic pain, cancer, epilepsy, and anxiety were told this plant was being grown under strict safety standards. For many, legal cannabis wasn't recreational, it was medicine, and they trusted the system completely. Dispensaries began to look like pharmacies: bright lighting, clean packaging, lab reports printed on labels. The presentation alone reassured customers, and over time, that reassurance quietly became assumption. If it's on a shelf, it must be safe. But behind the scenes, growers were facing a problem few consumers understood. Cannabis is extremely vulnerable to pests: spider mites, powdery mildew, aphids, fungus gnats. Indoor grow operations, warm, humid, packed with plants, are perfect environments for infestations. And infestations mean one thing for growers: destroyed crops, low profits, bankruptcy. So many growers turn to the fastest solution available: pesticides.
New at 7, it's being called the dirty little secret in the state's cannabis industry. Legal cannabis contaminated with harmful pesticides. ABC 10 News reporter Michael Chen visited a San Diego testing lab spearheading a campaign to shine a light on cannabis safety.
You can see the peaks here.
At Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs, emerging from a heap of charts and numbers is a question.
From a health perspective, how concerning are your findings?
Oh, I think it's very concerning.
Concern, says Lab Director Eric Paulson, that was first raised by clients in the cannabis industry in the fall, causing the lab to begin screening products across the industry for pesticides.
Infinite Chemical Analysis tested hundreds of samples like this vape product. In the end, about 5 to 10% came back with pesticide levels exceeding state standards.
Paulson says most of the 80 pesticide-laden samples were vape products.
Because those tend to concentrate the highest levels of pesticides.
According to Paulson, some of the samples they tested had 1 pesticide, while others had upwards of 25. And while some of the cannabis had pesticide levels just above state standards, some were far worse.
Some of the levels that we're seeing are hundreds to thousands of times higher than what the state allows.
Paulson says the motivation for using pesticides is a familiar one: greater profits. He says during the growing process, pesticides are either sprayed on directly, found in the soil, or drift from other farms.
Using pesticides is a cheaper way to achieve higher yields and mitigate some of the problems that you might have.
As for health problems related to pesticide, Paulson says a few of the identified pesticides can lead to acute issues like coughing and nausea, but the biggest concern is long-term exposure. Paulson's lab brought its findings to the state and the LA Times. Paulson says in a story published this past weekend, the newspaper's own investigation confirmed his lab's findings. The lab's campaign for more awareness appears to be producing results. Last week, the state recalled one of the vape products identified in the testing.
The state needs to essentially get their lab up to the level that they would need to be able to really truly surveil the market.
Michael Chen, ABC 10 News.
And we reached out to the State Department of Cannabis Control for a response to the lab findings and are waiting to hear back.
Here's the part most people don't know. Pesticides behave very differently when smoked. When food contains pesticide residue, your body digests it. Your liver filters it. But cannabis is heated and inhaled directly into the lungs. When pesticides burn, they can transform into toxic gases. Some of these include hydrogen cyanide, nitrogen oxides, and toxic solvent vapors. Instead of passing through the digestive system, these chemicals go straight into the bloodstream through the lung tissue. This is why many pesticides considered safe for food are not approved for cannabis. And the danger isn't always immediate or obvious. Unlike food poisoning, inhaled toxins may cause damage slowly over time. Repeated exposure can mean chronic exposure, day after day, month after month. For frequent users, that risk compounds quickly. Researchers are still studying the long-term effects of inhaling pesticide residue, but one thing is clear: inhalation exposure has been studied far less than ingestion exposure. That means many long-term risks remain unknown. An unknown risk can take years, even decades, to fully understand. Yet growers still use them, because cannabis exists in a strange legal gray zone. Cannabis is legal in many states, but federally, it's still illegal. This creates a bizarre regulatory gap. The EPA regulates pesticides, but because cannabis remains federally illegal, no pesticide can officially be registered for use on it. States are left to create their own rules. Each state has different testing standards, banned chemical list, and enforcement practices. Some test heavily, some barely test at all. Some rely on private labs paid by the cannabis industry itself. No single agency oversees the entire system. No universal testing standard exists nationwide. And no federal safety threshold guarantees consistency across states. In other words, safety depends heavily on where you live. This patchwork system also makes enforcement difficult. Products can cross state lines through illicit channels. Standards vary widely. And consistently, the foundation of consumer safety becomes incredibly difficult to maintain. It created the perfect environment for a scandal. And eventually, that scandal broke into public view.
May not be safe. Thank you for joining us. I'm Stephanie Grinley.
And I'm Greg Lagerquist. The state got a complaint actually about this from somebody who says they had an adverse reaction. As CBS 13's Brad Rogers shows us, further testing found unsafe levels of a pesticide.
The vape cartridges were sold between July and October in 21 cannabis stores in Maine, including 3 in Portland. Records show the now recalled Watermelon Chimera vaping product passed mandatory state testing on July 8th, including a negative test for the pesticide chlorphenapir. Yet months later, new testing found unsafe levels of the same pesticide.
How come that a batch passes through mandatory testing and then it fails later on?
We asked the Maine Office of Cannabis Policy that same question. Why wasn't the unsafe level of this pesticide found during the required testing process? We were told OCP has a chemist on staff who monitors for testing discrepancies and works with OCP's compliance inspectors to investigate any anomalies. They say in most cases they're able to identify and address contamination prior to products being sold. Shai Barakat owns OMG Cannabis Company in Portland, which sold 35 vials of the Watermelon Chimera. He's now contacting those customers.
If it's truly contaminated and made anyone sick, that's unfortunate and shouldn't happen. and I hope to prevent those cases from reoccurring.
The owner of Yanni, the company that grew and packaged the vape in question, told us he spends a lot of time and money to make sure his products are safe. He also says he doesn't use pesticides. He knows if he did, his products would never be approved.
He's still investigating into this, trying to find out whether the resin got contaminated during extraction or during testing, or maybe after it even passed and was sold.
This particular pesticide is primarily used to kill mosquitoes and bed bugs. The National Institute of Health says if ingested, it can affect the liver and nervous system and can be fatal. We've posted the locations in Maine where the vials were sold at WGME.com. If you have any left, the Office of Cannabis Policy encourages you to return it for a full refund. In Portland, Brad Rogers, CBS 13 News.
Whistleblowers and journalists began asking the same question. Are cannabis labs being pressured to pass contaminated products? Investigations in states like California, Colorado, Michigan, and Massachusetts revealed products testing positive for illegal pesticide residue. Some insiders described it as an open secret. If your product failed, you didn't fix the problem. You found a lab that would pass it. This practice became known as lab shopping. Companies would send the same batch to multiple labs until one produced a passing result. The result was a testing system that critics say became competitive instead of protective. Consumers had no idea this was happening. For the first time, the cannabis industry began facing scrutiny similar to pharmaceuticals and food production. Headlines began asking uncomfortable questions. Was the testing system broken, or was it never strong enough to begin with? Then came the recalls. Thousands of products pulled from dispensary shelves. Vape cartridges, flour, pre-rolls, concentrates, and edibles. Millions of dollars in cannabis products labeled unsafe. Many customers never even heard about the recalls. Some states quietly removed products without major public announcements, meaning countless consumers may have finished products later deemed contaminated. For many companies, recalls meant financial devastation, entire harvests destroyed, brand reputation damaged overnight. But for consumers, the bigger concern was simple. How long had this been happening before anyone noticed? Growers faced high taxes, strict testing, crop losses, competition from the black market. Legal cannabis exists in a strange tension. Highly regulated yet federally illegal. Highly taxed yet competing with untaxed sellers. A single failed harvest can destroy a business. Pests can wipe out entire grow rooms in days. Consumers expect perfect-looking product, no mold, no bugs, no blemishes. That aesthetic pressure encourages aggressive pest control. The demand for flawless cannabis can unintentionally drive risky practices. This doesn't mean all legal cannabis is unsafe, but it does mean legal does not automatically equal clean. Transparency is improving, but slowly. Some states are strengthening testing. Others are increasing enforcement and penalties. For consumers, the takeaway isn't panic, it's awareness. Understanding that regulation is still catching up to growth, and recognizing that legalization solved some problems, but introduced new ones. The story of legal cannabis is still being written. Like any young industry, it's facing growing pains in real time. The pesticide crisis exposed the gap between promise and reality. Regulation only works when it's enforced. Testing only works when it's trusted. And legal doesn't always mean safe. As legalization expands, pressure to improve safety will grow, because millions now trust this industry with their health, and trust, once shaken, is hard to rebuild. The question isn't whether the system is perfect, it's whether it can improve fast enough to protect the people who rely on it.